So, you start looking at scene 3, which is the moment of, I think, the completion of Abby's seduction of Aben, but also her kind of ousting of Mar and her spirit from and the vengeful presence from the house itself. Now, this begins in a grim, repressed room like a tomb in which the family has been internalized. This is Mar's parlour. So this is the locus of a kind of vengeful conflict, and has become the source of all of the family's conflict, and represents all of it, of the cruel injustice of a framed approach. And that's why it's a grim and repressed. It is, the vestige of his grim repression of her through her life that has in the end resulted in her vengeful presence staying in the location. Abby sits on the edge of the horsehair sofa. She has lighted all the candles, and the room is revealed in all its preserved ugliness. So the lighting here, I think, gives it this sacrosanct atmosphere, and I think legitimates Abby's connection with Mar. There's this sort of ceremonial, ritualistic, I guess almost the passing over of the torch through the connection that is established between her and Mar. A change has come over the woman. She looks awed and frightened now. So she's, I think, intimidated, by the weight of the professed connection that she says she feels to Aben's mother and to the maternal as an abstract concept. Aben appears and his face wears an expression of obsessed confusion. And so this, I think, shows us the way that he's compelled, but the fact that there's no understanding of these sort of subconscious forces, that he is obsessed and confused at the same time, that he's compelled by this fixation with the maternal and the Oedipal drives that motivate it, but again, doesn't really understand it. He stands staring at Abby, his arms hanging disjointedly from his shoulders, his feet bare, and his hat in his hand. So the body language and the use of his costume here is submissive, that he is in this moment of almost sacred acquiescence to his mother, but also submissive to Abby and what she represents. After a pause with a nervous formal politeness, Abby says, "Won't you sit?" And that nervous formal politeness again shows the weight of the connection between her and Aben's mother and the way that she feels the burden of that connection. He mechanically places his hat on the floor and then sits stiffly beside her on the sofa, and they both remain rigid, looking straight ahead with eyes full of fear. So there's this huge sense of conflict, I think, and that's between the passion of their connection and the reverence for this haunted maternal space and the concept that it represents, that there is a sense of reverence for what she represents. And that is in conflict with the sort of almost visceral nature of their passion. Aben says, "Ma, I can still feel something. It's Ma." And so there's this insistence about his dialogue here that shows us, I think, the solidity of his connection with his mother and the intensity of that emotional link. Abby then says, "Now since you come, seems like it's grown soft and kind to me," addressing the air queerly, "Thank you." So there's this huge, I think, connection of Oedipal impulses here. She becomes the conduit for these Oedipal impulses, and that's ultimately what the basis for his relationship with Abby is as a conduit for his Oedipal drive with his mother. A little further down, Abby says, "Maybe it knows I always loved you. Maybe that makes it kind to me. I don't know, I should think you should hate me. Hate you, sorry. No, I can feel it. It don't, not no more." She's certain about this. And Aben doesn't grasp the way in which Abby actually functions as this sort of Oedipal conduit here. Abby is certain of it. Aben is uncertain. Of course, we don't know that this is happening in any real way. We only have the character's impressions of this. And really, their uncertainty is, I think, registered by the audience. but it almost doesn't matter whether it's real or not. It's simply whether they feel like they're being compelled and whether they believe in these forces. Aben in a whisper says, "Seems like Ma didn't want me to remind you about stealing her place." And then Abby excitedly says, "I know." So here, in a whisper, it questions it whether is it to justify his attraction, or is he compelled by a kind of fatalistic or Oedipal attraction, where he says, "She hate you for stealing her place here in a home setting in her parlour while she laid. What is it, Aben? Seems like Ma didn't want me to remind you." There's this suggestion on Aben's part that, maybe he is justifying his attraction to her, or that simply he is being compelled by forces beyond his understanding and his control. Abby then excitedly says, "I know it, Aben. It's kind to me. I don't bear me no grudges for what I know and couldn't help." So she becomes the vehicle for his Oedipal desire, and that's ultimately what creates this sense of healthy reconciliation between the two. The dialogue, Ma bears him a grudge, well, so does all of us, and then he says, "I, with a passion I does by God." And this sense of vengeance unites all of them. It unites Aben with Abby, and unites the both of them with Ma. And it's why there is this sort of passion. It's a sign that there's something almost healthful, that there's something flowing, there's a vital connection between them. Abby takes one of his hands in hers and pats it, and I think she deliberately carries out this action in tandem with this sort of incantation almost, "Think of your Ma who's kind to us," in order to invoke that kind of maternal concept and the maternal connection, almost in a spell-like fashion. Abby puts one arm over his shoulder and he doesn't notice passionately, "I'll be good and kind to you." And then he says, "Sometimes she used to sing for me." So here, at this moment in time, he's occupied by memory, by the connection with his mother, rather than sexuality. And it's important that we see this, that this is what ultimately allows Abby to solidify her connection with him, is that sense in which she occupies that maternal space. Now, the dialogue underneath tries to directly establish a sense of equivalence, Abby and Ma, through what she says here. "Sometimes she used to sing for me, I'll sing for you. This was her home, this was my farm. This is my home, this is my farm." So this parallelism in the lines is designed, to show Abby's deliberate, very obvious attempt to put herself in that maternal role, in that maternal position. Aben then says about his Ma that he murdered her with his hardness. And then underneath, Aben says, "Sometimes she used to sing for me," and he bursts into a fit of sobbing. And so there's this, I think, the suggestion here of the victimized aesthete, and it's a very subtle one because these are kind of just stony, hard individuals in this particular play, but this connection that he keeps invoking, "She used to sing for me, she used to sing for me," I think shows us that softness that Ephraim keeps identifying in both characters and keeps criticizing. It's important because it shows us that he has this sense of similarity, and he misses this sort of authentic emotional connection with the mother, and that's actually what Ephraim is lacking as an individual. She then says, "I'll sing for you, I'll die for you." In spite of her overwhelming desire for him, there is a sincere maternal love in her manner and voice, a horribly frank mixture of lust and mother love. And here is the moment at which her position is captured, that she takes on both physical passion and maternal sexual compulsion. And this is the moment where their connection is deeply, deeply established. And then Abby says, "Don't cry, I'll take your Ma's place. I'll kiss you pure, Aben, same as if I was your Ma to you. And you kiss me back as if you was my son, my boy, saying good night to me." And so here, he is finally kind of coaxed by this maternal response to him, this maternal response to his tears and his sadness. So Abby adopts this maternal role as a way of fully solidifying the intensity of their connection. They kiss in a restrained fashion, and then suddenly wild passion overcomes her, and she kisses him lustfully again and again, and he flings his arms about her and returns her kisses. So there's this very swift transition from a kind of respectful maternal connection to this lustful desire. And it seems to be that, O'Neill is suggesting to us, once this sort of Oedipal situation is established, the sexual passion and the Oedipal rivalry with the father can be fully expressed. Suddenly, as in the bedroom, he frees himself from her violently and springs to his feet. He's trembling all over in a strange state of terror. And so this fear about the forces, this Oedipal drive that is beyond his comprehension, engenders this complete state of fear and misunderstanding. Abby makes a plea for a sexual connection here. Abby strains her arm toward him with fierce pleading. Don't you leave me, Aben. Can't you see it ain't enough loving you like Kamal? Can't you see it's got to be that and more, much more, 100 times more for me to be happy, for you to be happy? So this huge intensification that she carries out here, this massive sense of emotional intensity that she ramps up here. And then Aben's response to the presence he feels in the room is, Ma, what do you want? What are you telling me? And so this is a huge moment of crisis where he is experiencing the conflict between his Apollonian and Dionysian impulses. The sense of her as a rival, and of the materialism that is associated with that impulse, and then of his deep kind of sexual passion for her that is inflected through that Oedipal drive. And then Abby answers, though, she's telling you to love me. She knows I love you and I'll be good to you. And then further down he says, maybe, but I can't figure out why when you've stolen her place here in her home in the parlour where she was. She knows I love you. And then his face suddenly lights up with a fierce, triumphant grin. So he's convinced, I think, by revenge rather than pure passion. I see Wyatt's have vengeance on him so she can rest quiet in her grave. And so there's a sense here of him of actually deluding himself slightly, that it's purely, ultimately, what convinces him is his Oedipal rivalry with his father. He desires revenge on him. And that, in the end, is what provides him with the logic, that he can only make sense of this sexual compulsion by virtue of his desire for revenge rather than a sort of authentic romantic connection with her. And so Abby then wildly says, vengeance of God on the whole of us. What do we give a damn? I love you, Aben. God knows I love you. So there's a rejection here of Ephraim's values and a forceful commitment to Aben. I love you, Aben. God knows I love you. But then she adopts his language to make this pledge. And so again, there's a sense of conflict, of internal conflict in the language that she uses here to establish this Dionysian connection with Ephraim's sort of Apollonian religious theological language. Aben then throws himself on his knees beside the sofa and grabs her in his arms, releasing all his pent-up passion. And then their lips meet in a fierce, bruising kiss. There's this passionate catharsis that is released in the curtain lines of this. I've been dying for want of you every hour since you come. I love you. So there's this, again, within this oxymoronic language, there's this sense of pain and passionate catharsis that is going on in this expression of physical love, because it is about violent revenge as much as it is about sexual passion.